Hello, guys. So, welcome to yet another lesson on Introduction to Python. In this lesson, we are going to start out with variables and data types. Now, to put this in context, Introduction to Python here is for data science. Since Python is one of the most important languages for data science, it is ideal that learners pick up the fundamentals before getting into data science proper. In our earlier videos, which I would advise you to watch, is we dealt on introductions like documentations, writing comments, and Python style guide. So now we're starting out with variables and data types in Python. Now, as usual, it is important that the perspective is created for what we are doing. Now, Python is an object-oriented language, and as such, variables make a fundamental aspect of the objects created in Python. Now, I always say that, and I always say that to my students, that variables are building blocks for the Python language in itself. And for anyone starting out, it will be ideal to learn what variables are and how they are created. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create the first variable, and then we're going to look at how that works. Then we are going to talk about the rules for creating variables and what will make an ideal variable label, which is the name you use to create a variable. So first thing we're going to do is I'm going to write a variable called first underscore var, which intuitively would mean our first variable. Let me make this a lot bigger. Excellent. Right, so we create a first variable and it has a label. Then there is an assignment operator, which is basically the equal sign that you're used to in arithmetic or mathematics. Then I now add a value. Now the value is going to be a data type. It could either be a string, it could be a number. But we're going to talk about data types as we proceed. We're going to talk about the usual suspects of data types, of Python data types. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a string, and you see I put something like a double quotation, which is a double quotation actually. Then I say my first line of code. Pretty simple. Now, what's going to happen in the background is that the Python interpreter is going to allot memory. It's going to add this into memory. So once I click run, it's added it into memory. That means my first line of code is now associated with the variable first underscore var. Now, since it's in memory, okay, so first I'm going to do, before I say that, I'm going to document this. So I'm going to write, what will I call this? So say variable first underscore var, yeah, assigned value. Right, so with that we have our first variable. Now to see what has been assigned to memory, I would use the print function. And again, if we look at the documentation here, you can see that it's over here. You see that prints the value to a stream. So once we put in our variable first underscore var, and then we hit run, then you see our first line of code. Right. So that makes for a lot of makes for you to see the variables that have been the value that has been stored in memory. Right. So that was pretty simple, right? So the next thing we're going to do is we are going to talk about the rules associated with creating variables and variable names, because that is important. It is important that we learn those rules. Also, if you do not use the print statement, right? So again, I'll put this, this prints to stream, prints to stream the variable value. Now, if you don't, you can choose not to. If you don't, you could just basically call first underscore var, and it comes out in its raw form, so you can see that it's quotes and all that still works, right? But this looks pretty nice. Now, the next thing we're going to deal with is the rules. I would name this the rules associated with creating labels and variables. And I think that is really important when creating variables and their labels. I think it's such an important thing to do. Right, so I'm going to dedicate this to the next video. I just want anyone learning this to see that variables and data types are really important in Python, in the Python programming language, and creating one and running one for the first time is ideal. Right, so if you were able to write all this, then congratulations, you've written your first line of code, and you see it wasn't that difficult. In the next video, we're going to talk about, and I'm going to create it here. I'm just going to create this. I'm going to call this rules for creating variables, right? Variables and variable names, right? So I'm just going to make this markdown, and so that's going to be the entry for our next video. See you then.